I'm author and critic David Agranoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World. Hello and welcome to another episode of Postcards from a Dying World. If all goes as planned, this will be episode 195. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do for 200 yet, folks, but I'm trying to think of something real good. I will be returning to the Science Fiction Hall of Fame series here again soon. If you have not recently, my recent episode on CM Kornbluth's Little Black Bag is out there, so I highly recommend you check that out. Listen, I got two announcements. One of the reasons why I haven't been doing as many episodes, as everyone knows, I'm ass deep in organizing the Philip K. Dick Festival coming up in August. And that's a shit ton of work. And that's preventing me from doing as many episodes as I normally do. But we have two events in the near-term future that I want to put on your radar, one of which anyone, anywhere can be a part of, one of which you have to be in Southern California. If you're in Southern California on April 10th, we're doing a birthday party for Amazing Stories, the 100th anniversary of the magazine that defined science fiction. It was 3 years before the term science fiction existed, but 100 years ago, the magazine launched, and really fandom of science fiction is getting its centennial. So we're doing an event at Verbatim Books in San Diego, and we're going to have Philip Fracassi, Jonathan Mayberry, Cody Goodfellow, Jem Jank, who teaches the Clarion Workshop, is going to be there, Shelley Streetby, Gideon Marcus from Galactic Journey. It's going to be a really great night. We're going to record 2 live panels for the podcast. So they will eventually be here, but if you want to be in on the action, be part of it and ask questions and hang out with the crew, you got to come to San Diego on that day. And that's just a good excuse to come to San Diego anyways in April. Now, I have one other announcement, and then we'll get to Justin, and I'm sorry to make him wait. But the other thing we're doing, and anybody can be a part of this, is April 26th, we're doing a 14-hour webinar telethon to benefit PKD Fest. It's a $10 registration, and we'll be raising money throughout the day, but $10 gets you in, and we're going to have workshops all day long and interviews, and it's going to start in Germany, go to Italy, France, England, the East Coast, and we're going to go through all the time zones till it ends in Australia. So we're calling it the Global Time Slip. It will feature interviews with Ken Liu, Ray Naylor, Brian Evanson, Sarah Langan, Lord Running Clam for you dickheads, Eric Davis, and Bill Cyril, who did lots of drugs and hung out with Philip K. Dick. They're going to be doing a panel on Philip K. Dick as a mystic. We're going to have lectures, workshops, Lavi Tidar from England/Israel. We're going to have Stanley Kufan from China, Helen Shin from Korea. It's a global event, and you can be a part of it. We're going to have an Eventbrite registration going up in the next couple days where you can pay for your ticket and be a part of the Global Time Slip. And you don't have to go to all 14 hours. Once you get your registration, you go in and out, do what you want to do. Just go to the workshops you want to go to, and it's going to be great. So that is April 26th. Mark your calendars. You don't have to be there for the whole thing, but definitely join us for that. Okay, announcements out of the way. Now, we're talking today to Justin C. Key, who is the author of this amazing book, The Hospital at the End of the World, which is over his left shoulder. This is one of the best books I've read already this year, and I've read a bunch of strong books this year already coming into March. Um, it just came out a month ago, so it's a new release. You have no excuses not to get it. If at some point you're like, okay, I'm totally sold, you can pause this and come back after you've read it. But we're going to start talking with Justin about who he is and where he came from. Justin, welcome to the Postcards from a Dying World podcast. Sorry you had to sit through all those announcements.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I know you live in Los Angeles, but I don't
Mhm.
know if you're an LA native. I don't know where you came from, and I could have done some research, but I decided I wanted to hear it straight from you. What's your story, and how did you get into science fiction and writing in general?
Yeah, so I'm from Washington, D.C. So I grew up in D.C., Southeast D.C. to be exact. And my mom actually worked at the Library of Congress as a librarian. So one of her jobs was she would fill requests for Congress, and she had access to the library, like the all the books that have at least published in a United States of America, maybe the world, but I know United States of America are there in the Library of Congress. So she was big into reading early on, and then she could get me any book that I wanted
Any book.
very early. Yeah, yeah. So I remember I went to see Jurassic Park when I was really young. I think it came out in '93, and I thought, oh, this is my favorite movie ever. And I asked my mom if she can get me the book. And remember, she brought home like this novelization. And I was like, this isn't this isn't the real thing. Can I get like the book that it was based off of? And she brought home Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. And I remember after reading that, I asked my mom if we could write a letter to Steven Spielberg because he completely messed it up. I was like, there's so much here in the book, there's so many details, I don't know. I didn't know back then how things were adapted. But I remember learning so much from that book. There's some facts about the animal kingdom that I still remember today and having learned from that book and also being entertained while reading it. So I was a big reader, like a lot of writers, just a voracious reader as a kid. Found Stephen King and fell in love with horror, and then was also fairly big into gaming and started doing like some fan fiction for the Halo universe. So I'd started writing like short stories right in that area around the end of high school. And then when I went into college, oh, and I wanted to be a doctor since I was a kid. There's no one else in my family was a doctor, but my family would refer to me as Dr. Key because very early on, I think I was just inspired by a neurosurgeon and I wanted to be a doctor. So I went into school, college pre-med because you have to kind of have a set path. Like you need to
Right.
know that. But once I finished my pre-med requirements and I started taking creative writing classes in college, I started being part of critique groups. And I remember I read Stephen King's On Writing. I think it was 2007. It was like halfway through college for me. And he said a few things that always stuck with me. He was like, the first million words of practice. He says that he writes like the first draft in like 3 months and then he puts it aside for a few months and then he starts on the next thing and then he comes back with fresh eyes. And then he said that, the a writer's job is to read a lot. So after reading that, I sat down and I started writing a novel. And before I knew it, I had 100 pages. And I was like, well, I can't stop now. And I remember I finished it and I put it aside. And then I started on the next thing. And then I came back to it and revised it. And then I sent it out to this still emails I have where I blasted my college friends and professors and saying like, does anyone want to put eyes on this novel? I tried to get an agent for it back then, but ultimately it was my million words. It was my million words of
Yeah.
practice. And I've really been writing ever since fairly seriously. That time, like the 2007 to 2011, I think I really was writing every day and kind of got into my mind like, okay, I know I can write, I know I can finish a novel. And then the years after that was really, I think, getting experience in life, perfecting my craft. Oh, and going to medical school, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah. Well, that obviously plays a role in this novel. And we'll get there. But one of the things that, you know, I talked about a lot in my review is how strong this novel felt for a debut. It didn't have a lot of the weaknesses that some debut novels have, for example, like trying to cram too much in, trying to like get all the ideas that across like the finish line. And so I kind of instinctively knew that there was some trunk novels, there was some attempts, there was some things before this, but also you had a lot of experience publishing short fiction in genre over the years. And I didn't go through and read all of them, but I've seen your name before, and so I knew you had some experience with that. Like, what did you learn from publishing short fiction over the years?
Yeah,
And
and
you
I
have a
do want to.
collection, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I had a short story collection that came out also from HarperCollins a couple of years ago. Um, and I'm going to put a pin in the idea of like putting too much in your novel because my first novel was that, my trunk novel.
Yeah.
But when I went to med school, I had written maybe like three or four trunk, a couple of them I still want to come back to. But going into medical school, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to work on such big projects like that. And I had, through short stories, I was able to find more of a writing community because, with critique groups, you can critique novels as partials or what have you, but it's a lot easier even to
Yeah.
say, like, do a new short story a week. And then you're able to learn from the critique of that. And there are some things that might not translate, but a lot of the process of writing and characterization and prose and the mechanics, you can learn through revising and practicing and making short stories sing. And then I started realizing that there was a whole like pathway to getting published through short stories that wasn't as Hail Mary-ish as, publishing a novel, because publishing a novel, it's like, okay, I have to pitch to a literary agent. And then if I find one of those, which seems like extremely hard if you're not known, and then they have to pitch to a publishing house. And then, if I'm able to get in a book deal with that, then I have to sell the book. And then it's, before you know it, it's years and years and years where it's like, okay, I can write a short story, I can get feedback from my critique group, revise it, and then send it out and then start on the next one. And I also, being in the community, I knew that the rejections were going to come. And I thought of it as just as something that was, I could, for lack of a better term, pay my dues, right? Like
Right.
go through years of getting rejections, rejections, rejections. And one of the things, C.C. Finlay, who used to be the editor for the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, he used to send out these amazing personal critiques. And I remember, I tell him now to this day that that was very motivating for me because he had rejected him, but he responded and was like, I really like you as a writer, and I'm looking forward to your next thing, etc. And eventually, one of my first short story sales was to him. One of my big ones was to the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and I've had three stories in there now.
Mhm.
I did go to Clarion West in 2015, and so that is, for people that don't know, it's a fairly prestigious science fiction and fantasy short story writing workshop. It's 6 weeks, it's 18 young writers, six instructors, one for each week, and everybody comes. And the idea is to write a story while you're there per week, and you critique everybody else's story. So you write a new story per week, and you're critiquing 17 other stories. So it's really like a writing intensive. And that was my introduction, I think, into the science fiction and fantasy community, which
Mhm.
has been pivotal, I think, to my success since. Um, but to make it short, I think what short stories have taught me really is characterization. And I think that translates the most to in my novels. I think that over the time, like really in that short amount of time, how do you make the reader care for this character that they're only going to see for a few thousand pages? And I think that does translate well, at least page by page, to working on a novel.
Well, and you should know that you're in a tradition of publishing with the magazine of fantasy and science fiction first, with Philip K. Dick and Richard Matheson, for example, who both started
Yeah.
with that magazine. So not too shabby place to start. Um, which is great. And Clarion is local for me, and as far as I a lot of times when they do the off-campus events in San Diego, I've gone to a couple of those. That's how Sam Miller and I kind of became
Oh yeah,
friends,
yeah.
and and so it's you know I've never I've never I didn't personally go to Clarion, but like John Shirley, for example, is one of my mentors and he went in the 70s, and and so you can pick his brain and get stories about like the tradition of how when he had Frank Herbert and Harlan Ellison as teachers, right?
Yeah.
And it's just crazy, like to think about the tradition of that, and so it's really cool that you were a part of that. And were you already on the West Coast at that point, or
Actually, no, I was in New York. I was in medical school.
okay?
I was in New York in medical school, and it actually, when I applied 2015, it was going to be, at least for a while, like my last opportunity to do it, because
Yeah,
that's your last summer between second and third year. It's your last, like it's in school or in college, you have like the semesters and then you have a break. And the first 2 years of medical school is like that. But then after that, you're in the hospital and there's no more breaks, there's no more holidays,
yeah,
So that was actually like, I remember thinking this is my last chance to do it for a while. I had applied first in 2012, and didn't get in, but then in 2015 I did. So yeah, so I went from coast to coast.
yeah. Well, and just speaking from a strategic writer's position, also, this sets up nicely that this was a very smart strategic move for you as a writer, because not only were you writing what you know, which is one of those things that we get advice from, but also you put yourself in a position where you're writing a novel that you're uniquely suited for. And one of the best things for me when reading a novel is when I sit down and read a novel and go, hey, nobody else could have written this novel. This, because there's some novels I'll read it and I'm like, oh, dude, I could have written this one
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. But what's cool, but one of the things that's great about this novel is there's only one person I can think of, obviously, who could have written this, right? And that's you. And it comes across on the page as very specifically um lived it for that reason, and that's one of the things that makes it great. And it also would, in that regard, be appealing to publishers, to agents, to everybody, like, hey, we have a real unique opportunity here. So I'm sure you thought about that in the back of your head the whole time you were in med school. I'm sure you were devising bits and pieces of this novel the whole time, right? Just
Yeah, so it started off as a call for cross genres. So cross genres was an online magazine, pro paying, and they had themed submissions. And I remember, I think it was like I was first year in medical school, and I saw one of the themes was school, and I'm like, well, I'm in school,
yeah,
So I sat down and started an idea for a short story. At the time, it was like a far future, like think decades after Terminator, like Skynet has taken over, everything looks unrecognizable. And then, what it would look like if there's this last human-led medical school. And thankfully at the time it was rejected. I ended up getting, I think, one of my first sales in cross genres a little bit later. But that I only had like the first year, some of the first year of medical school where I was basically anatomy lab and in lectures, right?
yeah,
So the novel really expanded, with my career. It started off like as a short story, and then I expanded to a novelette and a novella. And then as I went through, not just the lecture areas, but the kind of clinical apprenticeship that comes with the last 2 years of medical school, and then you have like residency, where I decided to become a psychiatrist. But a big part of that is working in the hospital as well, and then becoming, like the independent physician who's dealing one-on-one with patients. All of that through the years, I believe, made it into the book. And it's interesting, though, that I was thinking about AI back then, because I imagine, right now it might be like, oh, it is a timely
Yeah.
topic, and that it might have sprung from the recent boom in AI. But it's actually that, when the last few years when AI has kind of jumped forward, there was almost a dread in the beginning because I was like, oh no, like what if my book is obsolete by the time it comes out?
Yeah.
But I actually think it was beneficial to the book because back when I wrote it and started the ideas, a lot of AI was still speculative. So I could think
Yeah.
about what are the things I hope it can do, what are the positive, what are the hopes, and then what are the fears, and it was less tainted by just seeing how things are manifesting today. Yeah,
Right. And a lot of times a book happens in the world at the right time by accident, and um all the stars line up for cool ways that people get in the zeitgeist with it. I think of Paul Tremblay's Survivor Song. He didn't know he was going to be writing a pandemic book that
oh
was
yeah,
going to be coming out in 2020, right?
yeah,
And it just happened that way. My first book, The Vegan Revolution with Zombies, is a like kind of satire of Portland, and and so Portlandia came out, and so we were promoting a lot as Portlandia with Zombies,
yeah,
right? And we didn't know Portlandia was going to happen. It was just like an accident of timing. So what happened with your book in this is that the pit becomes obviously
yeah, yeah.
a big show that,
Just thinking that.
yeah, is just putting everybody's attention on med school, like hospital residencies, and it's giving people like, so now of course your publisher has got the whole thing of like it's like a sci-fi version of the pit, right?
Yeah,
And which can sound reductive, but I don't think it is, because what I think it does similar is put you in the headspace of a student doctor, right?
yeah, yeah. And I've been watching The Pit and really love it as a show. And I think that it's an interesting thing because I've seen, medical dramas or comedies through the years. And one of the ones I really love is Scrubs, but I also love Grey's Anatomy for
Yeah.
what it was able to offer. But what they do or what they did, I think they really spent a lot of time translating things for like the audience. Whereas The Pit doesn't slow down to do that at all. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's in a foreign language. Because I wonder, I'm like, I went to med school and I feel like I needed to go to med school to understand like what they're talking about. But it's almost like they're able to do that and bring you into this world. But then, it's the emotions of the job. It's that physician human interaction. It's the knowing that these are not just kind of, I think, drama beats. It's the interesting thing
Yeah.
about it is because you might come in, it's like, oh, from a storytelling perspective, this patient is going to die. And I actually was telling my wife as we were watching it, I was like, I bet actually maybe it's going to go as planned because that's what real life is. Sometimes they come in and it's straightforward,
Yeah.
versus not everyone who, they come in with their spouse and their spouse seems to be the sick one. The person that seems healthy is going to drop dead. Like that's not, how it always happens. Sometimes it
Yeah.
does, so I think that it actually like tapped into, hey, let's try to really make this realistic. And I think that, real life being is fascinating. Being in the
Yeah.
emergency department and working in that setting, it's like, this is fascinating.
I had that thought because when I was watching this season of the pit where with the, and I think about this a lot too because I work with kids with autism. So augmentative communication is like a thing that we deal with. And so when they had the deaf patient, and then they
Oh
were,
yeah.
and they just kept not going back to her, I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, she's going to be so sick. And because they didn't get to her in time, and that wasn't the case, they just
Yeah.
eventually figured it out.
Yeah.
And but I thought it was a good misdirection. But anyways, enough about that. So with your book, um you're able to use your unique experience to create this story, but you talked about how you had this far future story, but instead of doing the far future story, this is kind of like um, uh, a next kind of 20 years type thing, maybe. I like that you don't give a date. That's very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, very specific. But and a lot of the novel is built around this concept of this one medical school that has decided to continue to do human-led medicine because the rest of basically the country has succumbed to this AI system. So maybe you give us your version of how you pitch the plot, for the people at home who might be undecided yet. They shouldn't be. They should already be out there getting it. But what's your how do you pitch the plot?
Yeah, so it is a step in the future. You know, we're right at the cusp of giving over the reins of society to AI. This like, global AI system, the Shepherd organization, they've just bought all the top medical schools in the country. That's also going to be their kind of ticket in to kind of, I think, taking over more, like all things is through medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
then the novel follows this young medical student, Pak. He's about 20. He's a top medical school applicant. All the top grades, should be getting into all the top schools. Is really bought into like AI is the future of medicine, and he wants to just be along for the journey, however it might be. And then he learns that he doesn't get into any of the medical schools. And his father is a physician. He grows up with his father in New York, which is like the hub for this AI revolution. But his father is still like does home visits, does old school medicine, quote unquote. And he's very close with his father, and that's who has inspired him. But he also feels that his father is kind of doing like medicine of the past. But then after he doesn't get in, his father dies like in a mysterious way, and it's connected to the Shepherd organization. And Pac, not knowing what's going on, all of a sudden he has to leave his home. He has to flee from New York, and he goes to New Orleans, which is like the last holdout city in the country that's rejected AI and technology, even to a point where they even have like a barrier over the city that keeps a lot of this latest technology out. And the rest of the country thinks that this is like a dying city, that their people there are suffering and just kind of backwards. But he goes there because his father told him to go there, and he finds refuge in Hippocrates Medical Center and medical school, which is the last human-run hospital and medical school, and he becomes a medical student there. So he has to go through the whole process of being a medical student, going from thinking that like, oh, I know this should be easy because this is less technologically advanced, and then he has to get humbled in terms of learning, real old-fashioned human-led medicine. And then, you throw in some medical mystery there, and also is the him figuring out the mystery of his own past and how it's related to his father's death and the Shepherd organization. And then you have like a sci-fi medical thriller. At its core, it's the question of AI versus medicine. But I think what I want people to come away with it is the importance of that human interaction, especially as we kind of go into this phase where there are going to be real questions. I mean, it's being answered right now of can AI replace humans? Can AI replace humans for? I think a lot of, the people in power and corporations, that's what they're looking to see where AI can replace humans to help out the bottom line. And I think at this core of this book is saying that there are some innate values of that human connection that can't be replaced. And I think technology has done great for medicine throughout the last 150 years, but it's always been as a tool in human hands. And I think that whatever advancements we have, that needs to continue to happen. So I think that's at the heart of the book.
Yeah, and it's successful as a medical thriller. It's successful as a science fiction novel. I think for me, like I always like little details of world building. I love that the people that are addicted to the technology are called scrollers, which is
Yeah, yeah.
kind of hilarious and awesome. But the thing is that as a paranoid, like kind of um techno dystopia, the book works on that regard without the medical stuff. And so I know I was curious when I was reading it, like, well, this is your first novel, like, and yeah, you're writing what you know. Are we gonna get more? I mean, I'm sure publishers are like more medical sci-fi thrillers, right? Or do you want to get away? Do you want to not always do that, right?
I definitely don't want to always do that.
Yeah,
I definitely would love to write more in this world.
yeah,
And actually, I'm writing a short story in this world right now, for kind of like an anthology call, you know. So I do think that there's a lot that I can say about this world, and when it comes to medicine, a lot of my short stories that have been published have been about medicine. I have a story that's coming out in Lightspeed, that is about a psychiatric treatment center. But that being said, my first love was horror. And I think one of the powerful things about reading and writing is being able to put myself in other people's shoes. Like,
yeah,
I can be an astronaut when I'm reading. I can be a fireman. I can be all those things that if I could live all these different lives, I would want to be. And I think that, I want to continue to explore that in writing. And I definitely think there's going to be a lot of stories where it's like there's not medicine in sight,
yeah,
just to kind of get that break from it. What I'm working on now, what I hope to be my next novel, is a body horror, like
yeah.
quantum mechanics, like science crossover. And then there are aspects when it's like, oh, this character here, okay, maybe they have background in psychology or in medicine, and then I can kind of flex a little bit there. But it's definitely going in territories that's less my knowledge base.
Well, are you familiar with? Have you read F. Paul Wilson?
No, I haven't.
Okay, he was a general practitioner. Like he was a doctor, and he wrote a series of he wrote one of the most complicatedly complex sagas in horror fiction, science fiction. The Repairman Jack books, they were bestsellers, but he got roped into writing medical thrillers for a little while, and I remember him telling me how glad he was that he did the medical thrillers after he had established himself writing
Oh yeah,
other
yeah.
things, because he was like when I interviewed him, he said if I only got to write medical thrillers, I would have not had fun doing them, but because he had established himself, he had a Stone Cold Classic in the Keep like years before people figured out he was a doctor. And I think the first medical thriller that he wrote, he was approached, right, and they said like, hey, you're a doctor, you want to write this. And but yeah, he had a he has he's I took a workshop from him, and he's kind of my plotting Yoda.
Hmm.
So if you ever get a chance to read F. Paul Wilson, I highly recommend reading
I'm writing it
him.
down.
Yeah. And he's the king of misdirection. And I shouldn't have told you that because now you're gonna be looking for it.
Now I'm gonna
But
be like,
yeah, you're gonna be
yeah.
looking for it. But he wrote a series called Repairman Jack, and there's
Mhm.
like 15 or 18 Repairman Jack books. And then he wrote another series called The Adversary Cycle. And book 3 of Adversary is book 1 of Repairman Jack, and book 6 of one series is book 15 of the other. And they come together. It's one of the most intense things of plotting ever. But that's a whole. I don't know why I went on this tangent, but Paul was a doctor too,
Yeah.
and 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 a very popular writer in the 80s and 90s. Um, but I'm wondering too, like, yeah, because obviously I want to hear more from this world. Sorry, my pup is coughing. She's been doing that for the last like off and on for the last night. Sorry, everybody. She's okay. Um,
What kind of dog?
she's a senior Chihuahua.
Oh, nice,
So
nice, nice, nice. We
yeah,
just got a family dog, so So I thought maybe she would have been making an appearance like from her barking, but she's been
She's
behaving.
being good. No,
Yeah,
she's doing a great job.
yeah,
Um, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. But yeah, I want more of this world, and I'm excited to hear. I think that even the concept of the spires in the city, that
yeah.
I think that there's a lot of other corners of this world that are ripe for exploration. So I'm sure you've thought about that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and one of the things I'd love to explore next is surgery. I mean, because that was the reason that I actually went to med school, and really heavily, they say with surgery, you got to love it and know that you would rather do nothing else. And I went into med school actually wanting surgery to kind of like yank me by the neck and like, this is what you're going to do, right? But then I fell in love with psychiatry and, I had a family and I found myself in the OR more so looking at the clock, but still just fascinated, I think, with that ability to go in and, do something that I think the human body was never designed to do is like, cut open somebody and then there's a problem, fixing, quote unquote, that problem and then putting them back together. So, and then what does it look like in this world? What does it look like with, the ethics of it with not the latest technology or the ethics of it when it could be maybe a robot could do this like perfectly.
Yeah.
So that's something that I, definitely wanted to explore because going through medical school, that is something that they would learn whether they want to be a surgeon or not. It's one of the interesting things when, people learn that I'm a psychiatrist, sometimes I have to remind if they asking that, I went to medical school and I did, the same 4 years that, a surgeon or an anesthesiologist would do, learn how to suture all those things. And then we go out and choose what we want to spend the next, several years learning to do.
Mhm.
But we all still get that basis no matter what type of doctor you are. So,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I had a friend through activism who was a trauma surgeon in LA, and uh, Dr. Jerry was an interesting cat. Like it takes interesting cats
yeah.
to want to do that. And I some of the stories he told, I was just like, okay, whatever. And I don't think I could be that guy. But it takes a special breed. Yeah, so Pac is a character once he gets into the situation, um, and once he gets down there and gets to see another part of the world, it's a really good way to do the world building is to have him be somebody who's not from New Orleans. If he had been from New Orleans, the world building wouldn't have been done as subtly, and so that was like a smart choice. But also, his father has a connection to the medical school, so he has a connection to a degree, and so he knows somewhat of what he's getting into. But once he gets down there, like it ties into what's happening in the rest of the world. And I don't want to. I'm dancing around, not giving away,
Yeah.
but it takes on kind of uh, a global political science fictional territory, and I think there is one version of this novel that is just the science fictional aspect of going to medical school, but there is this overarching story that builds into the world, and I think it's really excellently woven together. I'm assuming, did that part of the story come first, or did that? Um, I guess I'm getting into the pantser or planner
Oh yeah.
question, you know. And I'm a planner, by the way, as a writer. So I don't judge, but I'm just saying, like, I know some of the pantsers are very militant about it.
I'm definitely not militant in either way. I'm a pantser who is open to other ways. I mean, I think I was imprinted by, with Stephen King, because Stephen King
Yeah.
said he was a pantser. And so usually on first drafts, I'll go. And then, the revising or what have you, then it's like make an outline out of that, revise the outline, depending on kind of where I am in terms of how much it needs. So I think, and this novel, trying to think, because I've been working on it in different iterations for a long time. I think that as I went in, as I went through it, there might be like little ideas or things that I put in, and then I'd go back and like flesh that out. It's like, oh, I'm talking about this. So one of the things, for example, is like how they get their information, and the news outlets. And I think about kind of what I see now with like how news is divided, and who tells the story or what have you. So I knew I wanted to touch on that. And maybe it started by, as I'm writing, it's like, oh, what if there's a paper, and then it's like, okay, but then is there a rival paper? And then, okay, now that that's there, when I go back and bring out what is the theme I'm trying to say here, and sometimes those things go in and then they get taken out, right? It might be
Mhm.
like you're saying before, like knowing like what is like not trying to put everything into the novel. For example, my fascination with surgery, like I could have tried to also put in like a whole surgery subplot or what have you there, but it's like, okay, no, I'm interested in that, but that's not here in this novel. But so to answer your
Well,
question,
someday you'll get
yeah,
to write your surgery novel.
yeah,
Right?
someday, if you're out there listening, I want to write a surgery novel. Um, but yeah, definitely a pantser. I'm writing a short story now, even short stories, like, and I'm doing it longhand, and it's definitely like I'm discovering as I go. And I think once I'm halfway there, I might have an idea of like, oh, okay, this is how it's going to end. But I usually
Yeah.
just have like emotional beats in my head plus an idea when I start out.
See, my thing with Stephen King is that I think all of his best novels are the ones where the ending is baked in ahead of time,
Yeah,
like The Dead Zone or Misery, or the ones where like It or The Stand, where he didn't know what to do and he
yeah.
ends
Then
up,
they,
yeah, then he writes
yeah, it does.
forever
It,
trying to
it
figure it
gets a
out.
little, the turtle at the because I was wondering if they were going to try to like
Yeah.
adapt that in the 2017 movie, which I love. I actually went to see it after being overnight shift at the hospital, so it was actually I was in like an interesting state. I went to see it at like
Yeah.
10 a.m. showing, but I was wondering if they were going to try to do that whole turtle thing, but that
Yeah.
they were like, let's just put some references to the turtle. Um, but yeah, a lot of his novels towards the end, it's like, oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, have you read Sleeping Beauties? Um, the
No,
what
is it?
the one
That's
with
one of.
Owen?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Okay, so I had an experience of there was one chapter where I was like, man, that was really well set up. I was like, that's the kind of thing I feel like somebody who's planning a novel would set up, or that feels like
Yeah.
outlined. And then I found out later that they wrote it as a TV pilot first.
Mm.
So they did have an outline
Yeah.
for
So then,
Sleeping
yeah,
Beauties.
yeah,
And then they went back, and then I was like, I knew it. I knew
yeah,
it.
yeah,
There was just a way that something was set up. And I know in my review on my blog, I went crazy talking about how I knew it. Uh, but that's just me being a militant outliner. Because to me, you can outline and it's fine because it's like you can look at a map of a city, but it's not the same as walking around the city when you get there. And as long as you're not religious about the outline, like it can't change,
yeah,
as
yeah,
long as you can discover parts of the story when you're sitting down to write. I also think that there's a certain amount of uh, privilege for the people that don't have day jobs. Uh, you know that they can. Sometimes I need a map where I can sit down and say,
yeah,
okay, what was I going to be doing next? But that being said, I couldn't tell with Hospital at the End of the World. And I give you credit for that because I feel like um, I felt like I was in the hands of a storyteller who knew what they were doing, which sometimes my problem with some pantsers is that I can tell that
yeah. That
they didn't
is
have a,
like they don't know where they're going.
they don't know
Yeah,
where they're going. When I felt in very good hands with this novel. I felt like I was surprised by things, but I felt like you knew what you were doing. Does that make sense?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
I feel like this novel is of all like the alchemy that comes together of a person who's the uniquely positioned person to write the novel and the story that pretty much only you can tell. I think it comes off great. The characters are very rich, very real, um, and but most importantly, the setting and the feeling of everything. So, on that note, before I get to anything that might require spoilers, I just want to again say uh, this book is available wherever books are sold. You can get it. It's in. I know I got an arc, so but it's a hardcover release, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and I just I think it's one that people are going to remember for a long time as being a powerful debut. And so, and it has a real, I mean, it's early in the year. I realize this, but it has a strong chance to be in my top 10 at the end of the year.
Well, thank you.
And I really appreciate it. I discovered you in a very modern way. I know I said this in the review, which is I saw you on a panel at SFAM, and followed you on all the socials while I was sitting in the audience, which is a super modern way to be
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
okay, yeah, this guy's interesting. I'm gonna follow him. Where are we going next? What can we look for next? You've got some short stories you're working on, and
Yeah, so I have, let's see, there's a short story coming out in this anthology by Inlandia. I think a subset of it's Blacklandia, and they're doing a Black mental health anthology. So I have a short story coupled with an essay about the short story. And it's not science fiction, it's not speculative. It's
yeah.
about a couple dealing with like how best to raise their son that's on the spectrum, and they're both like well-meaning, and
Mm.
and seeing like how they're both kind of struggling with different ways to come about it. And then I write an essay about it. That should be out, I think, in May. What else? Oh, I have a story called. We just changed the name of it. What is it called? I think Empathetic Psychosis, that's coming out in Lightspeed. Now we're in March, a month from now, so in April. So that's a really cool story. I think it's about a psychiatrist who has a type of schizophrenia where his psychosis is he takes on the symptoms of his patients, right? So for
Mm.
example, if he's treating somebody for OCD, then he'll start having like OCD symptoms himself. Or for example, a silly example might be like fear of butterflies. He might be afraid of butterflies. I don't know if that's actually in the story, but he's the medical director of this intensive outpatient program, and then we see kind of his journey and how it affects him. And then I have some other like hopeful stories like that I'm waiting to hear back from. So hope to have other things published. I just had a story in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. It
I
came out at the
read
end of
that one.
2025.
I
Yeah,
read
yeah.
that
So
one. So
yeah, so it feels like a 2026, but I think it was technically a 2025. Um, and then, I'm working on what I hope to be my next novel, finishing up like a third or so draft this month, and to get out to some beta readers, and then, hopefully get it to a place where, you know, um, I can make something official out of it this year. Uh, so yeah, so
so there
that's
is a novel in progress. There's
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Good.
The Word doc is open on here right now. I got 75,000 words, so not too shabby.
Oh yeah, you're pretty close to done.
Yeah.
I would imagine. No, I was excited to you shared that issue with two authors. I consider very good friend Maurice Broadus, who's a Hoosier. I'm from Indiana.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and John Shirley is everyone here who watches my podcast knows John's like my all-time one of my all-time favorite writers. So and has been on here many times, and we've worked together in the past and on a screenplay and stuff. So I was very excited to see you were in the issue with those two friends, as well as Nedia Corfor has a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
great story in that issue too. So everybody should. I'm a subscriber to the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and everybody should be. So let me just put that out there.
Yeah.
Um, and but no, I'm very excited that we've got a novel in progress. Uh, yeah, it's exciting stuff, and also excited just because you're a part of our Southern California, Los Angeles, San Diego metro science fiction community, and of course I want to make sure that you feel welcome at PKD Fest we've got coming up in August. It gives me another excuse to mention it.
Yeah.
But August 20th through the 23rd. But folks, we are here right now to promote this book. So definitely get out there and get Hospital at the End of the World. I don't know if there's anything that you really want to discuss in spoilers, but I was trying to keep it spoiler free. I know a lot of times I drill down on the writing and in the spoiler section. So you know what? Let's do that. Let's do a little spoiler warning just in case.
Okay.
And let's not worry from this point on. If you've made it this far, if you haven't bought the book already, go pause this, buy it, and come back, and we'll do a short spoiler section here. Um, on the writing with, okay, so we're in spoilers now. So the whole disease aspect of it, that and and Puck's the disease that comes into it here at the end. Puck was kind of like drafted in to be like kind of this Trojan horse to mess with this medical school. Was this the original? Was this part of the original concept of the idea from the very beginning, or was that something that you happened upon while you were writing it? Because that's where I want.
Yeah, that did not happen in the beginning, just very briefly, like the short story, when it was first a short story, he came to this medical institution that's supposed to be like, bringing back human-led medicine. It's supposed to be like all the good things that AI wasn't, but then he found that the institution was experimenting on his patients to push forward medical like knowledge, right, to make up for what
Mhm.
they didn't have in technology. And it actually ended with him poisoning the whole medical school, which I'm glad it
Yeah.
didn't that didn't get published then. But in terms of him being, connected uh, um, in a lineage way, that definitely came later. It was kind of, thinking about, okay, why, what from a physiological standpoint, if I want him to experience this disease, but then he's immune from it, he doesn't, or he's able to survive it. Because I did want to have, this was very early on when it became longer. I did want to have him experience the disease. Then it's like, okay, but why does he survive? What is it that's special about him? And you could think about, for example, like with pluribus, where it's like you have that 12 and 8 billion chance. But then that's a big coincidence. I think even
Yeah.
it's less of a coincidence if it's like, okay, there's this story of why is his father
But then,
connected to the, yeah,
and it also makes sense with why he didn't get into all the other medical schools, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like that
yeah,
they needed to kind of push him in that direction. And for that reason, and these are all things of why I thought it felt and I say this as a compliment. That's why it felt like well plotted to me. I'm a plotting and structure guy. I love plotting and structure. So if I make a compliment towards your structure, that is it. That is me giving you a very genuine compliment. I know some people think plotting is a dirty word, but I thought that was great. That being said, um, when when you get into kind of these characters that are or withdrawing and having these things, it can come off sounding like a bit of um, a little bit luddite for this, but what I think is really good is you balance that there are some positives to the technology, and
yeah.
it's not either all there, it's not either all therefore or against, right? So it seemed to me like you were very cognizant and aware of from the beginning that you can't write this story without having a little bit of messaging in it, whether you mean to or not,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that me thinking of AI from the very beginning was there was a lot of excitement there, just in terms of like I'm going into medicine and what technological advancement might we have, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the writer side of me is like, okay, well, anything that's positive is going to have this negative. I think of Minority Report, for example, and great technology where it could prevent crimes, et cetera. But what's the downside of it? Like, what is it that you
Yeah.
lose, right? And so that I think that a lot of that is baked, I think, into the story where there is nuance. Whereas I
Yeah.
think if I might have started it now, it might have been like,
Yeah.
the stuff AI is doing, like we didn't want this. So
And I
I
just
think
want to
that,
point out to
yeah.
everyone that he gave the PKD example. I did not. See, I tried not to always bring up PKD. So, well, and look, Ray Naylor had the experience, and I'm wondering if this is happening for you now too. And I waited for spoilers for this. Mountain in the Sea is one of my favorite science fiction novels of this century so far. And Ray had this hilarious experience where, when it came out, like everyone wanted to talk about the octopus language. Like everybody
Hmm.
wanted to talk about the octopus language of the
Hmm.
book. But then a couple months later, like this whole AI storyline that he had in it became what everyone wanted to talk about. And he was like, hey, I like talking about the octopuses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, are there aspects of this novel that have started conversations you weren't expecting? And like, have you already started to see it kind of shift here and there from like once it came out in the world? Like, are you seeing differences?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I've had to kind of prepare mentally for is, AI being so, I think, opinionated now.
Yeah.
Whereas, again, when I first started it, it's almost like if I'm writing a book about what it would be like if we encountered aliens, like
Yeah.
extraterrestrials, and then it came out after a time where we have encountered extraterrestrials and people have opinions about whether
Yeah.
they like it or they don't, then it's like, okay, I'm not on this side, right? This book isn't, it might seem like it's on that side. So that's one of the things I've had to, just mentally kind of, prepare for. I haven't seen, knock on wood, there hasn't been too much vitriol from it or like challenging from people. But I'm ready, at least I hope I'm ready for that. I think it's great to hear things come up that I might have forgotten was in the book or forgotten that, oh yeah, I did spend time like on that. Or aspects about it that come more naturally to me, like how the anatomy scenes, land with people and, the response that they might have from it. Whereas, going through that, it was normalized in a way. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not like going through it in terms of like the questions like, have you thought of this as body horror? How did you write this or what have you? And it was like, oh, it's our experience every day going into the anatomy lab and like dissecting somebody who donated their body. And then, just recognizing that's an example, but a lot of things in medicine, almost like looking at the pit is, second nature to me over time,
Yeah.
but could be very foreign to people reading it. Um, and I'm glad I feel like I've made it accessible. And then,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing too that happens with when you put a novel out in the world is sometimes like, you will have had the part that you think is super like, oh man, this chapter is going to really rock people's worlds, and then like nobody notices that
yeah, yeah,
particular
yeah,
chapter, right? And with my novel Last Night to Kill Nazis, like my very favorite chapter of that book, I kept waiting for people to like bring it up to me, and no one ever did. And I was
yeah,
like, eventually had to, in interviews when people would ask me about it, I'd say, I do want to talk about this one chapter because, you know, and then people would be like, okay, I get it, but it can happen with, that you have a part that you think is really powerful, and then when somebody else finds it, then you're like, oh, awesome, they got it. And there were lots of different little corners of this book I found very, very powerful. So uh, for me, Pox, storyline of being manipulated into this situation was one that I really liked, but couldn't talk too much about in the reviews because I felt like it was a spoiler.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I thought it was really well handled. So,
Well, thank you. I will say one of the things with that I enjoyed writing, and I think allowed me to flex a little bit more of my kind of more fantasy horror was like when he's going through the psychosis, Pac.
yeah,
And I think, we're in the spoiler area, but there's a point where he's like carrying his own head, right?
yeah,
And obviously it's a hallucination. And I actually think past versions were even more bizarre, and I kind of reined it in. And I was like, all right, that's, they kind of going a little bit too long with that, with this, but. I had a lot of fun with that, and then I was also kind of like, oh, I wonder how this will land with people, or if they'll be like, oh, I didn't understand this at all, or oh, it's kind of cool, or if it'd be like, oh, I forgot that happened.
no, I like that because I think it did a really good job of showing like how hard it would be to distance yourself from the technology once you were used to it,
Yeah.
and and we see it for I see it in my work where we're not allowed to have phones on the floor, right? And like I see some people just like going nuts every day because
Yeah.
they gotta do something with their hands or they can't. So that rang true to me, and I appreciated that. So, all right, Justin, I have one um, question for you that can kind of remain offline too here. Just interested in one thing that may not be as interesting for the readers or for the listeners as it is for me. But I, on that note, how can folks find you and find your work? And do you want them to find you?
Yeah, I'm definitely in a stage where if you message me on like Instagram or tag me, I will respond. I will, if you're saying bad things, I will just, I won't respond. I'll give you your space.
They
But
made it this far.
yeah.
They're feeling positive.
Yeah. So, JustinCKey.com. On most socials, I believe I'm Justin C. Key. On Blue Sky, it's Justin Key. But yeah, the book is sold wherever. But if you find me on socials, tag me or comment or ask a question. I'm trying to do a TikTok thing, but maybe don't even look at that. It's a train wreck. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Um, this was an excellent conversation. I'm really glad to talk about this book. Really hope it looks like it's finding readers. I hope it finds even more.
Yeah.
And if we can do anything to help that, I appreciate that. So for the folks at home, remember Global Time Slip coming up April 26th. Uh, keep your eye out for registration for that. And Philip K. Dick Fest in August 20th through the 23rd at Cal State Fullerton here in California. It's 1 week before Worldcon, so you can make a whole California vacation. We're also going to be having a a pop-up museum at Cal State Fullerton, and they're going to have all the manuscripts from the archive out there, including like the original red penned, like straight from the typewriter version of Dune, for
Mm.
example, that you can see with your own greedy
Oh,
little
cool.
eyeballs, and you can see all the stuff that Frank Herbert cut out. Spoiler alert, it's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, when I went down to Fullerton to get all the PKD stuff, but I couldn't help myself. I had to look at Dune, and the amount of stuff that's crossed out and red penned and the notes on the margins of that first draft of Dune are crazy. If I was a Dune scholar, I would lose my mind looking at all that stuff. Instead, I just nerded out a little bit. Um, but yeah, here in Southern California, we have a lot of the best sci-fi archives in the world, so it's kind of a cool thing. All right. On that note, folks, I'm sure we'll see Justin again in the future with future releases. I'm very excited to read more in the future. This was a great novel. Please go out there and get it.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you. All right. See you later, folks.